When I pulled up to my parents' home on Thanksgiving, I expected a warm family reunion, laughter, and the rich smell of a holiday feast. Instead, I walked into a scene of quiet humiliation. The woman who raised me with gentle hands and endless love, my 78-year-old grandmother, Evelyn, was standing in a faded apron, clearing dishes, taking orders, and being spoken to like hired help by my own parents. My mother didn't offer her a seat. My father didn't even look up as she scrubbed the heavy pots in silence. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I quietly packed my grandmother's belongings into a single suitcase and drove her away in the dark. But the real shock came the next morning. While unpacking her things, I found a small wooden box wrapped in canvas. When I pried it open, what I found inside turned my family's reality completely upside down. My name is Clara. I am 32 years old, working as a corporate accountant, and for the past 2 years, my career kept me hundreds of miles away from home. This Thanksgiving, I was finally heading back to my parents' house in California, eager for a cozy holiday full of laughter, warm meals, and family stories. But the moment I stepped through the front door, the warm nostalgia shattered. I expected to see my 78-year-old grandmother, Evelyn, sitting comfortably by the fireplace, wrapped in her favorite knitted shawl. She was the woman who had raised me with boundless love and gentle hands while my parents built their careers. Instead, I walked into a cold, disturbing scene. Grandma Evelyn was standing in a faded apron by the kitchen island, her hands trembling as she wiped down the counter. Before I could even hug her, my mother, Brenda, walked in, tossed a dirty serving platter onto the counter, and snapped, "Evelyn, clear the dining table faster. The gravy boat needs to be scrubbed immediately." My father, Richard, didn't even glance up from his tablet. He just barked, "And make sure the coffee is hot this time." Grandma quietly bowed her head, murmuring, "Yes, right away," as she hurried toward the sink with heavy, tired steps. I stood frozen in the hallway, horror knotting in my stomach. My parents had moved Evelyn into their sprawling suburban house a year ago under the guise of caring for her in her golden years. But sitting at the dinner table that evening, I watched in rising outrage as they made her eat last, alone in the kitchen, speaking to her not as a mother or grandmother, but as unpaid, disposable domestic help. They had completely stripped away her dignity, treating the anchor of our family like a servant in her own home. The dinner table scene only got worse as the night wore on. When Grandma Evelyn accidentally dropped a small salad fork on the hardwood floor, my mother sighed dramatically and tapped her nails against the polished oak table. "Honestly, Evelyn, if your hands are getting too weak to carry silverware, maybe you shouldn't be in the kitchen at all," Brenda said, her tone dripping with sharp, performative impatience. Grandma flushed red, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I'm sorry, Brenda. I'll pick it up right now." "Leave it," my father grunted without looking up from his glass of wine. "Just go down to your room. You're ruining the mood." My blood boiled, but I knew making a scene right then would only make things worse for Evelyn after I left. That night, after the house fell completely silent around midnight, I made up my mind. I crept out of my guest room, crept down the carpeted stairs, and headed for the basement door. My parents had relegated the woman who built our family's foundation to a small, windowless basement room that smelled faintly of damp concrete and old boxes. When I pushed the door open, I found Grandma sitting on the edge of a narrow twin bed, fully clothed, holding an old framed photograph of her and my late grandfather. "Clara," she whispered, wiping a stray tear from her wrinkled cheek. "What are you doing down here, sweetie?" "Pack your clothes, Grandma," I said quietly, kneeling in front of her and taking her cold hands in mine. "We're leaving." She blinked in shock. "Leaving? But your mother." "My mother and father are abusing your kindness," I interrupted gently but firmly. "You aren't their maid, Grandma. You're going home with me tonight." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, they were tears of immense relief. Together, we gathered her meager belongings, a few faded dresses, her favorite sweaters, and her worn leather suitcase. I carried the bag while guiding her quietly up the stairs and out into the crisp midnight air. We loaded the trunk, slipped into my car, and drove away toward my apartment in the city, leaving my parents sleeping soundly, completely unaware of what we had done. The next morning, the heavy tension of my parents' house felt miles away. I woke up early to prepare a warm breakfast, bringing a cup of chamomile tea into the guest room where Grandma Evelyn was resting. For the first time in years, The tired, haunted look in her eyes had softened into peaceful relief. After breakfast, I set her worn leather suitcase on the bed to help her unpack and settle into her new space. As I folded her faded dresses and hung them in the closet, my hand brushed against a heavy, rectangular shape wrapped tightly in an old flannel blanket at the very bottom of the bag. "What's this, Grandma?" I asked, lifting the heavy object out. Evelyn stopped sipping her tea, setting the cup down with a soft click. A subtle, mysterious smile played across her lips, a glint of the sharp, resilient woman she used to be before my parents wore her down. "Open it, Clara," she said softly. "It's time you saw what's inside." I unwrapped the flannel to reveal a small, antique wooden box with a solid brass lock. Evelyn reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a small silver key she had kept hidden for years, and handed it to me. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the key in the lock. The latch clicked open. Inside lay a neatly organized stack of official legal documents, fresh financial statements, and heavy paper deeds stamped with official state seals. As a corporate accountant, I knew how to read financial records in an instant, but what I saw on those pages left me completely breathless. The sprawling suburban house my parents lived in, the luxury vehicles parked in their driveway, and even the real estate management firm my father claimed to run as his own, none of it actually belonged to Richard and Brenda. Every single asset was held entirely inside a revocable family trust, and the sole creator, trustee, and beneficiary of that trust was Evelyn. My parents had spent years acting like wealthy aristocrats while treating Evelyn like a charity case. In reality, they were living entirely off her generosity, surviving on an allowance managed by her trust. And because of a specific clause in the deed, Evelyn held the absolute legal power to revoke their living arrangements and reclaim every single asset at any moment she chose. By 10 a.m., my phone began vibrating furiously on the kitchen counter. It was my mother. When I answered, Brenda didn't even ask if Grandma was safe. Instead, her voice came screeching through the speaker, furious and hysterical. "Clara, did you take your grandmother? Put her on the phone right now. Your father and I came downstairs to find her missing, and the kitchen is a disaster. She was supposed to prepare the Thanksgiving leftovers and start the laundry." I took a deep breath, looking over at Grandma Evelyn, who gave me a calm, decisive nod. "She's with me, Mom," I said, keeping my voice dead even. "And she is never coming back to be your servant again. If you want to talk to her, you and Dad can meet us at 2 p.m. at Mitchell & Associates in downtown." "A law office?" Brenda scoffed, her tone turning venomous. "Don't be ridiculous, Clara. You have no right to interfere in family matters. We feed that woman and give her a roof over her head." 2 p.m., Mom. "Don't be late," I replied, and hung up. When my parents arrived at the high-rise law firm 4 hours later, they walked in with supreme arrogance. My father had his hands stuffed into his pockets, smirk firmly in place, ready to lecture me about disrespect and family hierarchy. Brenda stood beside him, glaring at Grandma with petty irritation. "This is an absurd waste of time, Evelyn," Richard sneered as he pulled out a leather chair at the conference table. "If you're upset about chores, we could have discussed it at home." That was when Mr. Mitchell, Evelyn's longtime trust attorney, tapped his pen against a thick paper file and looked over his glasses. "There will be no chores discussed today, Richard," Mr. Mitchell said coldly. "We are here to execute a formal revocation of the Whittaker family trust." The smirk instantly vanished from my father's face. Brenda went dead silent. "What are you talking about?" Richard stammered, his confidence evaporating in a second. 30 years ago, Evelyn placed all family properties, including the primary estate you currently reside in and the capital backing your real estate firm, into a revocable trust, Mr. Mitchell explained, laying out the deeds. "Due to documented fiduciary abuse and elder neglect, Evelyn has exercised her legal right to terminate your residency and strip your management authority, effective immediately." The fallout was swift and absolute. Within 30 days, my parents were legally evicted from the grand suburban house they had bragged about for years. Without access to Evelyn's trust capital, my father's real estate business collapsed under the weight of its own unpayable debts. They were forced to sell their luxury cars, pack up their designer clothes, and downsize to a tiny, 2-bedroom rented apartment on the edge of town. For the first time in their lives, Richard and Brenda had to face the reality of their own actions and learn what it truly meant to work for everything they had. Grandma Evelyn, on the other hand, began a vibrant new chapter of her life. I helped her move into a beautiful, sunlit condo just 3 blocks away from my apartment in Carmel. Her balcony looked out over a peaceful garden, filled with bright white roses and fresh lavender. The tired, fearful look that had haunted her for over a year completely disappeared, replaced by the gentle laughter and quiet grace I remembered from my childhood. She spent her days tending to her garden, joining local book clubs, and cooking delicious meals, this time, purely because she enjoyed it, not because anyone was barking orders at her. She finally had her freedom, her dignity, and the peace she had earned after a lifetime of loving others. Standing up to my parents was the hardest thing I had ever done, but seeing my grandmother smile again under the morning sunlight proved it was worth every single second. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you have done if you found out your family was treating a loved one like this? Have you ever had to take a tough stand against your own relatives? Comment below and let me know the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Thank you for watching until the very end.